Eri tā tangata, he mauri reo, he mauri ora, he mauri ora e.
Tāmihana Kātene is joined by multi-disciplinary artist, storyteller and taonga pūoro practitioner Te Kahureremoa Taumata no Ngāti Kahungunu me Ngāti Tuwharetoa. With a love for sound and a strong connection to Te taiao, Te Kahureremoa chats about cultural influences, her passion for sharing mātauranga through kōrero pūrākau, and her own creative musical endeavours with taonga pūoro. E te iwi, whakarongo mai rā.
Nau mai kia hau manu e.
Whakarongo rā tāne te tokorangi ki te whio rau katauri ki te waiohine ki te oro ruarangi ki te kōkiri haimata. Whakarongo rā ki te huangunguru ki te huangongoro ki te oro paria tangarua hine moke moke. Pāheko atu ko te tuki ona mata kia hau I te rongo take tū te manawa rū, tū te manawa roa, tū te manawa oro. Haumi e hui e, tāiki e. Anō reira kei taku hoa, nau piki mai, nau haramai ki tēnei wānanga o tāua. Nau haramai ki tēnei wānanga kia tohato atu. Ene mō māhuatanga a kui mā koroma. Nō reira kei taku kōpara tū whārangi, kei taku korokoro tui. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora, tēnā koe hoa. O te rā ki te hunga whakarongo, tēnā koutou.
Ko wai koe.
Oh, yeah.
Tēnā whakamohia mai, ko wai koe, nohea koe.
He kahungunu, he Tuwharetoa hau. Ko te Kahureremoa hau. Te Kahureremoa Taumata. I tipu mai au ki Wainiomata, ki te whanganui ātara. I kuraina hau ki te rawhanui kura kaupapa Māori o ngā kōhanga reo o te awa kairangi. Ki te kura tuarua hoki o Hato Hoepa. He māma ahau. E rua aku tamāhine, ko Iwa te Owai, ko Piata Nian. He ringatoi, he kai waiata, he kai kōrero pūrākau, he wahine Māori. Tēnā koutou.
Tēnā koe, kōrero. Yeah, welcome to this wānanga.
Yay, I'm excited. Thank you.
Awesome. First of all, let's get a bit of a picture of who is Te Kahureremoa Taumata and mahanga pukenga. And so the first thing I wanted to do was to basically explore your origin story, where your ngākau nui came from in this mahi that we both love. Kōrero.
My origin story. I love telling people this story because I actually have made up like a little bit of mythology around my own origin story. Okay, so I introduced myself as Te Kahureremoa, but I was actually born Te Kahumata Momoe. Did you know that?
I think I did, actually.
Yeah. I was given that name at birth. I was supposed to be a boy. And then when I came out with a tara, they still gave me the name that was intended for me if I was a boy, Te Kahumata Momoe. And I had a crooked finger. This is important. My right pinky was crooked. And I opted to have it amputated when I was 14. And that also happened to be the year that my dad asked me if I wanted to change my name to Te Kahureremoa. It had been a decision that never quite sat right with him. You know, my name being Te Kahumata Momoe. Even though we are Te Arawa Waka, we're not Te Arawa Iwi. But they still kind of went with the decision to name me Te Kahumata Momoe. And then as I got older and started to become a woman, my dad was just like, I feel like we should change your name. And, you know, in Te Ao Māori, changing your name, taking on a new name is kind of like nothing new to us. It's a practice that we've done for years. So it was like a really comfortable decision to come to. And being 14, I was like, can I pick my own middle name? Bro, I went through such crazy middle names. Like I wanted to call myself Blaze. But then I settled on my middle name being Te Opira, which is my mum's maiden name. That's our ingoa whānau from Kahungunu. And then the year I got my finger amputated was also the year I officially changed my name to Te Kahureremoa. And I believe that that was like I was just fated to be, and this is how I'm known today, Te Kahureremoa, the four-fingered storyteller. And it's part of my storyteller persona. I was always, I believe now, just thinking about, you know, the way that I grew up, the influences in music that I had, Māori music especially, I was just always going to be a pūoro player. I was always going to be a storyteller. I just have always been so attracted to music, oro, and kōrero pūrākau. And like, as a child, I was fed, because we grew up Katorika, but like heaps of other Māoris, we had hahi and like our heathen stuff fed to us like so normally. And I will say for Te Hahi Katorika, mean stories. Jesus was mean. He had mean-ass stories. And so my upbringing had a lot of like Western influences. I knew a lot about, you know, I had a baby Bible. So I would read the Bible as much as I would read Maui stories. I would read about the Greek gods as much as I would read about atua Māori. So I feel like in a way it kind of set me up to be able to sniff out, you know, colonization in some of our pūrākau because I was fed both of those things. And I think it's kind of set me up to sniff out colonization in some of our kōrero pūrākau because it's prevalent.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's an important thing we need to think about. And, you know, when we're journeying through te tohatohatu ngā pūrākau, is that, you know, there are some of the messages there that we need to rethink.
Also speaks to the lenses that people were telling our stories with at the time, you know. You know, what the early missionaries did was they did take our stories and then kind of like mash them up with the word of God. And that was how, you know, just the amazing storyteller skills that they had. But it's meant that some of the stories that have been passed down in the way that we do have that, thread of colonialism in them.
The colonial flavour.
Yeah. It's not the nicest flavour.
Oh, rawi. Awesome. Yeah. So what I want to do now is just to basically explore taonga pūoro, because this is something that we both adore and love in the practice, whereas my focus is slightly different from other people's. And I wanted to explore where your ngākau sits and where your puku sits in terms of this great wide thing that is taonga pūoro. There are so many different aspects to it in the practice itself, you know, from weaving to carving to storytelling to the musical side of things. So let's start off here by just exploring which parts of this awa pūoro really resonate for you. Okay,
I want to say, like, straight off the bat, everything. But I think, you know, ko ngā kōrero a ngā atua Māori, kei reira taku ngākau. I think that's, and ko te taiao, that is like just the core of it. I think the simplest core is that my heart is with our atua Māori and te taiao. And I think the beauty of taonga pūoro is that that's where all our instruments come from, our atua and te taiao. And that's how our instrument, you know, where that they're made from the materials from those places. And I'll tell you, one of the most profound things that I've ever been told and that I've held on to my entire adult life and pretty much through my journey in taonga pūoro. It was actually at Yomarai, at Hongoeka. I can't remember who it was. It was one of the uncles from around the pā that came in. We were having a wānanga at Hongoeka. It was many, many years ago, probably about 15 years ago. And one of the uncles came in on our Poroporoaki day. And we were just all checking out. And then he was just kind of like sitting in the corner and he was really inspired by listening to us talk about our experiences of the weekend and wānanga about pūoro. And then he said, I'm probably going to butcher what he said, but he said, our atua haven't stopped talking to us. We've just forgotten how to listen.
Kia ora.
And he said, just go outside and be quiet. Noho puku, ki waho. And something about just him saying that at the end of this wānanga, it changed me. So simple, but it did. It changed me.
Absolutely.
It changed the way that I am outside. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And honestly, how I approach pūoro is I have almost religious faith. It's not the same because I don't worship our atua in the same way that, you know, other people worship their gods. But I have just a well of faith in our taiao. To me, they have God status. To me, the moana is a god, like to our people. Yeah, and there's so much for us to learn. And there's so much that they're saying to us all the time.
All the time.
If you just go out there and shut up.
Well, that's a really, really good point, you know. There's one of the things about atua Māori is when we think about the whakaaro behind our atua and the taiao, we directly whakapapa back to the taiao. So that's one of the connections that we've lost. That's actually a really beautiful thing to hear as well, because, you know, sometimes we forget that in our practices.
And I wouldn't even say lost. Do you know, I'd say distracted.
Kia ora.
Life is so complicated. You know, in our living memory, I feel like it hasn't been as complicated as it is now. And there's so many things to keep us from being outside without shoes on. And, you know, I don't think that our people are lost. I think that our people are just distracted or trying ferociously to make their way back. And, you know, the impacts of colonization set up all these roadblocks. So I don't want our people out there to think that they are lost. You are found, my G. We know where you are.
I see you.
Yeah. It's more just making the commitment to go outside, and it's intentional. Do it now before the Pākehā start giving it new names, like taking your shoes off is now called grounding. You know, we need to reclaim, this is part of land back, the reclamation of our traditional practices, demystifying them, giving atua status back to our taiao. I think there's a way for the future. We know this as Indigenous people, and part of my practice as a pūoro practitioner is to just make that real simple for our people, make it accessible. I just feel like I always want to be available to our people and be like, nah, you can. Come on.
Kataia. Oh, awesome. It's a really profound way to look at how we approach the taiao and just being, you know, just go and just be. And in my practice, that's a really important thing as well, is kia rongo wai a rehutai, you know, feel the spray of the sea on your skin, and that for me is a spiritual moment. Oh, rawe. And I think it's really important for us to make that connection with being still in our environment, and especially in my practice, and just being, you know, just sit there, be still, quiet your mind and be is really important. What I'd like to do now is just to explore where these whakaaro, or these philosophies that you apply to your practice have led you, and where your area of expertise has developed over the years. Because let's not mince words, you know, he mātanga o rokoe, you're an expert in these different fields. So where do you see these skill sets and your expertise having developed throughout your journey?
Yeah, I'd also just like to say, just right off the bat, I'm not a scholar. So I feel like I have quote-unquote mātauranga that isn't the same as a scholarly person that's gone to university. I'm the school of life.
Kia ora.
And I've spent a lot of time over the last, I think it's been about 17 years since I started playing pūoro, like, seriously. And so I have my own ways of, like, collecting mātauranga from others, and it's not the same as a scholar, but I think there's merit.
Absolutely.
Or I know there's merit in the ways that some of us choose to do it outside of formal schooling institutions. So my areas that I love and that I've dedicated my life to studying and unravelling is in kōrero pūrākau and the performance of taonga pūoro, which I feel like performance is a thing unto itself, and probably an area of taonga pūoro that gets a lot of attention
Kia ora.
because the performer is the rep in a way, and how we practice and how we've seen pūoro in this day and age, especially in the last 30 years in the revival period, is we've seen pūoro, taonga pūoro performed.
Yeah, kia ora.
And I'm just suited to performance, let's be honest.
That kahungunu swag.
Yeah, got that kahungunu swag, and it's something that doesn't scare me. Like, I was scared about being on this podcast, but chuck me up in front of like hundreds of people to tell a story, and it's easy to me. And I guess like I sort of came to performance just based on the fact that I knew I could do it, and why not hone the skills that I already had.
Yeah, kia ora.
So I feel like the performance aspect came before I really established myself as a kaikōrero pūrākau. And it's been a style that I've been in development of for years. I will say about storytelling is it's something I've kind of just had to develop on the fly, because there aren't very many storytelling practitioners, Indigenous storytelling practitioners, especially here in Aotearoa and especially Wahine. So I have met other storytellers over the years, but the practice that I've developed has been from going out and telling stories, and I'm like this close. My fingers are really close together for everyone listening. But I feel like because of the time that I've spent being a kanohikitea as a storyteller and going out and actually wherever there are people with ears and hearts, I'll tell stories.
Kia ora.
And so I feel like I'm ready to start sharing some of the things, you know, some of the little notes and things that I've learnt about storytelling. But I think also I really want to meet other storytellers, other Indigenous storytellers. I feel like I want to go around the Pacific and meet storytellers from around the Pacific, because I think that that would also just add so much depth and richness to the pūrako that I already have in my kete. But I say this to you a lot, I feel like my answers are in the Pacific. So in terms of the extension of my practice in storytelling, I'd like to build on the stories that I already know by getting more of those clues in from our kasis in the Pacific.
Kia ora.
And in that, I've been learning Olelo Hawaii, and I'm about to start learning Samoan
Kia ora.
in a couple of months. One of the things I think that has helped me as a storyteller has been the fact that I can kōrero Māori. And I think being able to understand our language means that I can, you know, in researching and learning about some of our stories, the kurahuna are in te reo.
Absolutely.
Because that's the way that we hid some of our stuff.
Absolutely.
From the colonizers. And so it's given me this added depth that I know that if I want answers in the Pacific, I'm going to have to speak their reo.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a real homage to the practice, is you know, to learn the reo so that you
Yes.
can contribute and learn from their
Yes.
practices in their own reo.
Yes.
You know, and that's like a symbol of respect for people that are entering te ao Māori
Yeah.
and entering into mātauranga Māori spaces. You really can't get an understanding of the mātauranga and the practices without a grasp on the reo. One of my base philosophies is that, you know, a lot of our cultural philosophies are hidden within the reo.
Yes.
And our scientific processes are disguised as cultural practices.
Yes.
And so that's one of the great things. So let's dive a bit deeper into pūrako. This is a really important thing for us moving forward in terms of not just pūoro, but also with everything that we do. So the Indigenous peoples all around the world are the original storytellers.
Yes.
And it was an art form, it was a way of life, and not just for the passing on of knowledge, but, you know, kia whakarata i te iwi, telling stories. You know, I think they term it our creation mythologies and stuff nowadays. But when you start breaking down the mātauranga that is hidden inside these pūrako, there's some really beautiful and deep stuff that,
Oh, hell yes.
that really connects us to our taiao, to our atua, and how we view the world.
Yes.
I've seen you deliver a couple of pūrako, and one of them that I really, really enjoy is the pūrako of Hine Pūtehue.
Yes. One of my favourites.
Yeah, talk to me about that pūrako, and the way that I've seen you deliver it is obviously a lot of love and passion towards that pūrako.
Yeah. It also, you know what, something I'll say is I don't always tell the story the same thing. This is a part of my belief as a practiced storyteller, is that it's the storyteller's prerogative to shape the lens of how the story is told. So depending on, and another practice of a storyteller is that you look your audience in the eyes. It's not a theatre show. You're not pretending to be someone else. You are the story. Oh, well, I do pretend to be Nam, but do you know what I mean? I'm looking at my audience and meeting their eyes, so I can make a lot of, I guess, creative calls in that moment. And it's from looking at whoever's in front of me, helps me make decisions in that moment as to how I tell the story.
Yeah, it's almost like interactive, you know,
100.
when you're on the spot,
Yes.
as opposed to just putting something rehearsed and just doing it.
Because I do spend a bit of time in rehearsal or thinking about how I want to tell the story. But everybody that knows me or that has worked with me in storytelling knows that I make the decision in the moment. A lot of calls, that's part of the storyteller's thing, is you have to be think on your feet quickly. You have to respond to who's there gathered, because otherwise you're just telling stories to a mirror, my G, and that's boring.
Yeah,
It's
right.
boring. You're telling stories to people. So I've forgotten what you've asked because I went on a tangent.
It's part of the wānanga is just, you know, we what we do is we just kōrero about stuff.
Okay, so pūtehue, I
Pūtehue,
remember.
kōrero.
Yeah. Well, I'm drawn to this story because I don't know if I should tell the story. Part of me feels like, don't explain it, tell the story. I'll tell you a quick version for anyone that's listening, just because I'd like for you to understand what we're talking about so you don't miss anything.
Kōrero.
Also, you can go and have a look at my Instagram page, and I tell stories all the time. So, Pūtehue. Pūtehue is the daughter of Tāne Mahuta, and our creation story. After the separation of Ranginui and Papatūānuku, there was a great war between all of the atua. It was Tāwhiri Mātea that was warring against the rest of their whānau. Tāwhiri Mātea was angry at the separation of their parents, so they sent forth a huge storm to tear apart Te Ao Marama, the newly formed world of light. And every atua fought back with all of the powers of their realms to no avail. Some stories say that it was taonga that bested Tāwhiri, but the story that I tell is that there was nothing that they could do. Tāwhiri Mātea's storm was too big, too powerful, that it was likely to be destroyed, the world. And so Tāne Mahuta charged his daughter, Pūtehue, with the responsibility of bringing peace to the whenua again. And what she did was she took in a huge breath. She inhaled the tempest and she held it within her puku. Her puku became round. That's why hue have those delicious, round, womanly bodies. She held the storm within herself and then she exhaled. And when Pūtehue exhaled, it was a beautiful sound that was so calming that she brought peace back to Te Ao Marama. And that's Pūtehue's story. And I tell it depending on, again, like I said, who is in front of me, I tell it different. But I think this is a story, everybody can relate to this. That feeling of taking in or holding rage. Either who are you in this story? Are you Tāwhiri or are you Pūtehue? Because both of those capabilities are in you. Are you the storm? Because if you're going to be the storm, girl, you bring the peace.
And when we break down the pūrākau, there's so much we can learn from it.
100.
And that's what I absolutely love about them.
And also, when you hear different versions of the story, there's more kurahuna to be found. Because one of the other things I do as a practitioner is I don't discount anyone's version of a story. I tell my version, the way that I was taught, the way that I have put them together. But that's the beauty of coming from an oral culture, oral histories. And it's a practice. I just like to discourage our people from trying to tell other people that their pūrākau is wrong or that you never change a pūrākau. No way, key, bro. Because our people are adaptable. There is absolutely no way that you can tell me that someone wouldn't have put their own 11 herbs and spices. Like, we're too adaptable. We're too imaginative for one stagnant way of being. So I would like to encourage our people in future, going forward, that, you know, pūrākau, however they're told, are relevant. Even if you're telling a colonised version, kei te pai, because you'll know when you hear other stories. Be open to hearing more than just one version. You close yourself off if you're only listening to one version and you honestly are believing that there's only one way.
Absolutely, and that's not how we roll as Te Ao Māori.
That sounds like white supremacy to me.
That's one of the beautiful things that I love about Te Ao Māori is our iwi individuality. You know, people have different versions of stories, and one of the hard things about being a storyteller is making sure people understand that these are my stories that I've been taught. When I'm in Wānanga, we start talking about whakairo, etc. There are about 3 or 4 different versions of the Rua Te Pupuke story, and it's so beautiful to see different iwi whakaaro that are brought to the world of light through their stories.
It's also what makes conversations more yummy, like chewing the fat with your bro and they bring forth another version that you never had and it blows your mind and, you know, for the next 3 weeks, that's all you can think about. Like, that sort of stuff sets me on fire. So I feel like some of the best learnings that I've had and the things that change me as a storyteller come from those chewing the fat moments with my homies, with my tuakana. And that's just how I roll. I'm literally that person that everywhere I go, I'll ask a person, you know, if I look at them and I'm like, I feel like this person might have a good story to tell me, I'll beeline for a person and then ask them questions like a real life interview and write down notes.
Yeah, probably. And I think that's one of the beautiful things, especially here in Te Upoko o Te Ika, where we have quite a wide range of practitioners in taonga pūoro, and
Yes.
we have different backgrounds and different focuses, and
Yes.
one of the things that I love is getting someone's perspective that is different to mine.
Yes.
Almost
I think
like
that's why we're good homies. Yeah.
yeah, that's part of how I grow in terms of what I'm doing. So the art form of telling pūrākau and telling stories is something that I've really been inspired by lately, because, there's the way that I've done it for, 15, 20 years, and it's basically to the point where I still feel this connection with this pūrākau. This is the way I tell it, but I really want to explore the telling of it.
Oh, yeah.
One of my favourite whakatauki is a hereanga hano te rā ki te tenga o te korokoro. And this talks about binding the rays of the sun to the base of your throat so that kia whakamahana ia rātou te hunga whakarongo.
Yes. And koera te mahi o te kai kōrero pūrākau, 100%.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and so I've really been inspired by people such as yourself who take the tuku of the pūrākau and make it something beautiful.
Yeah.
So there's something that I've been really gravitating towards.
The whakatauki that I have for my practice is also shame. We made up our own whakatauki.
Kōrero.
Oh man, I'm quoting myself. How embarrassing. But it's true. It's something that I hold in the pit of my puku, and it goes, he puna mā tauranga te kōrero pūrākau, I reira ka puawai a hinengaro, ka pōhewa he aoke. So the art of storytelling is a well of knowledge, and it's there that we can imagine new worlds, basically.
Absolutely.
And that's a thing as a storyteller. I know I'm doing a really good job of telling stories, is if people start to look past me and I can see that
There's something going on.
I can see the storytelling world.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's to remind me, because I feel it's a huge cultural responsibility too.
Absolutely. Well, me whakahoki tāua ki ngā mahi oro. So we've talked about the storytelling aspect of your practice, and
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about the performance side, which if we check out your Instagram like you plugged earlier.
I was actually thinking I have animations of the 3 main stories that I tell. I pretty much have a kete full of stories, but I tell 3 pretty much. Just like I've got a kete full of pūoro and I play 3.
Yeah,
pretty
kia ora.
much. Yeah, that's our say.
Let's take a step back into the performance side of things.
Yes.
What inspires you in the performance? What is your focus? And when you're performing and you're accompanying with taonga pūoro and maybe with voice or with waiata and mō te pāo, he aha tūrane.
Yeah.
Where's your focus for that side of things?
Everywhere in all of those things. In terms of the explorations, I don't like limiting
Kia ora.
myself or restricting myself. I'm inspired by just sound in general. I think I'm a real sound nerd. Pūoro players are sound nerds.
Absolutely.
Kia koutou te hunga whakarongo. If you are a pūoro nerd or you know one, you'll know that we can spend ages just rubbing on a rock.
Absolutely.
Cracking some bones.
Or just stop dead still in the middle of the street
Yes.
because a stone on your foot made a really good sound.
But yeah, it's that, I love that nerdy stuff, just the pure visceralness of sound and getting down and dirty in the mud. I have so many things that I want to achieve, or not achieve, but explore. It's not goal orientated, it's just, just feel drawn to doing heaps of things, and I haven't run out of exploration. So yeah, I like to just explore with sound, but in terms of taonga pūoro, I love composing for mainstream music. I love doing soundscapes for art installations. I love holding ceremonial side of pūoro, because that stuff is happening way more often now. There are more taonga pūoro in hands than ever before.
Kia ora.
And so I've been seeing in our urban spaces and our urban pōhiri people rocking up with pūoro. Yeah, so I'm just interested in I'm a busybody, in every single place that it can go and be. I kind of want to be a part of all of it.
Oh, no. But there's also the stuff like the loop machines that you use.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I use taonga pūoro to accompany my own music and the explorations that I want to make as a singer-songwriter, which is different. So all of these ways that I approach pūoro are all kind of different hats that I wear because they all require different things. For example, you know, using it in my own music, I've been really into developing my oro as a recognizable oro. You know, this is one of my things now that there are so many of us playing, is and starting to recognize the different manu in the wao. And something that I talk about is developing my own style and my own melody so that whenever I play,
you hear it, you know it.
People know, but it's a little bit of a flex, but more I think what it is just to start to encourage those little manu whakatangi to come forward with their recognisable ways. This is going to be so dope for our mokos in the future, e huama. This is the driver.
Absolutely.
It's leaving little clues for our mokos.
And I think that's part of the beauty about the stage that we're at within the pūoro journey is that we know with the revival side of things is kind of on the wane, and we're now with te puawaitanga. You know, we have so many different tauira that are hungry to learn, and each of them has their own specific little ways in which they approach playing. It's like there's the Maiangi Nui crew here. You know, there's that flutter that you do for the Ororuarangi. As soon as I hear that, I know you guys are playing.
I reckon what we're doing at the moment is really just developing really our iwi, even our rohe, because we don't all live in our iwi rohe, but there's going to be specific sounds, and I think that Te Whanganui Tara is a really exciting place for taonga pūoro at the moment. You know, Te Whanganui Tara is a super arty place, and there's lots of pūoro nerds here.
Absolutely.
And like tuakana, that's another thing, is that there's heaps of us tuakana here, which I think we've all got really good relationships here too, a really strong network of people.
Absolutely. And the cool thing I like about this crew here in Te Whanganui Tara is that there's like such a wide variety of the different skills that, you know, so tauira here get to learn from people who are focused on different aspects. And
scholars.
Kia whakawhānui ake o rātou māramatanga. Well, while we're on the topic of your music and the kōrero and singer-songwriter thing, so I hear there's magic in the mix. So tēnā kōrero mai.
Yeah, well, my debut album. I know I've been playing music for so long, and this is my debut album. Such a Māori way of doing things too, like already do my album like way later into my career. I've spent the better part of last year working on my album with an amazing producer, Neil McLeod. Shout outs to Neil.
Yeah, Neil.
So because I'm a pūoro player, we did something you probably haven't heard pūoro used like this before, I think. I mean, I'd like to say that I have a good awareness of the types of music that are happening here in Aotearoa. Also in pūoro world, I think, is even smaller. So I don't want to call it too soon, but I think what's exciting about this project is that it's pūoro presented in a different way. Even though I am singing on most of my album, there's one track that's purely instrumental. It's called Patupairehe, and it is exactly that. Like, it's an enchanted forest where you get drawn in by these beautiful sounds, oro. So yeah, because I'm a pūoro player and a kaiwaiata, it means that my compositions, or how we create the music that eventually becomes the song, is we start with pūoro first. And I know that that's something different, because from what I've seen of pūoro mixed with singers or in mainstream music, is that you can tell that it's an after the fact thing, where they bring in the pūoro player later to just like play over what's already there.
And that's one of the things that's happened for so long. You know, pūoro's the plus one. So it's a kōrero.
And I don't roll like that. But yeah, nō ku te maringa nui I whakaia Neil ki te mahitahi. It was a beautiful treaty partnership, is what I call it. A treaty partnership. You know, he tāne Māori ia, he's young as well. But, he Māori, I said he tāne Māori ia, mōtaku he tāne Pākehā ia. Ngākau Māori, we'll say.
Ngākau Māori. Everyone needs their treaty partner. I've got mine.
But, you know, we exchanged skills, and he worked so hard. I taught him about pūoro. And I feel like brought him into our world under my wing. And I think, you know, for us, I think when you come in and you've got a mate that everyone trusts, it helps you to like just be in the world a bit better. So I feel like he came in trusted because he came in with me.
Yep, absolutely.
But yeah, he was totally open and excited to work with taonga pūoro. And so a lot of the songs that we wrote for my album just started off as a pūoro jam. Every day we came in, when we were in the initial making phase, I'd check what was happening in the maramataka, and then I'd come to him and I'd tell him what moon phase it was, and then we'd have a pūoro jam, and then that would be how we formed the compositions that you hear on the album.
Oh, rawe. So I wanted to move on. There's some kōrero that I think needs to take place. And in the 20 years or so that I've been studying pūoro, one of the things that's really evident in the practice is that it's very male-dominated.
Just like the music industry in general.
And one of the things that I always like to kōrero about is te ao Māori is all about balance. And mōhio ke tātou ki tēnei āhuatanga. And one of the things that I'm focusing on personally is how do we get that balance within te ao pūoro? So there are certain things within our mātauranga and our cultural practices, and especially in the practice of taonga pūoro, where the focus and the kawe of the kaupapa, in my personal opinion, needs to be done by our wahine. Because there are certain things our wahine can do that tāne can't, and vice versa. It's all about that balance. But one thing I'm really keen to focus on as we move forward on this path is how we walk this path side by side with tāne, with wahine, and give wahine the space that they need to do the things that they do. And I think this is something that I love to kōrero about, and it's not talked about enough, in my opinion. One of my focuses for the next couple of years, one thing that I'm going to do is learn to be a better kaitautoko of our wahine. That's a decision I've made, and that's something that I really want to do. What I wanted to do was just kōrero about your whakaaro in the space, because your experience is very different from mine. Probably be about the same time we've been on this journey. And in most of that time, most of my experiences are listening to men get up and talk about stuff. And I want to change that. So, tūkuna mai o whakaaro, what's your experiences like in terms of wahine in the space?
Well, my experience as a wahine in pūoro is, first of all, I had no wahine mentors coming through. So carving out space for myself, I would say, has been really awkward, just because I've had to be a lot more assertive than I feel naturally. I've had to find that kaha within myself, which feels awkward to do. You know me, I'm not a person that, although I can be straight up and don't mind getting down for an argument, to defend myself, it's not actually a natural state of my being to be really assertive and outspoken. Other people might not believe this, you're lying. But I think I've had to cultivate this really fierce, assertive energy, especially in te ao pūoro. I had to force my way into my very first taonga pūoro wānanga at Te Papa back in the day, because the boys were sick of people just coming in and wanting to just burr, 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 and then do nothing. They wanted to make sure that anyone a part of their pūoro crew, and this is how I got my start, was jamming at Te Papa when I worked there with Haumanu ki Te Papa, and is how I eventually met my tuakana, James Ma, Horomona Ma, was through Haumanu ki Te Papa. But I had to force my way into that group. And I say this all the time, but stalk them. And just be at every pūoro jam that they had, even though I wasn't invited. I mean, that right there is the main point, I had to force my way in. But I think because I'm a performer, I can put on a mask and be I'm confident to be here. But it's been awkward. And I think it's what makes me fierce as a tuakana to carve out space for wahine, so that awkward stuff doesn't have to happen again.
You shouldn't have to happen.
No.
Ever.
No. So I haven't had many wahine mentors until now. I feel like in the last maybe 3 years, I've really started to build more relationships with wahine. But that's also because we're becoming more visible to each other, because finally there's a bit of space for us to see each other. For such a long time, people thought that only tāne could play pūoro.
Straight up.
Straight up. And even to this day, people think that you have to like be of a certain caliber or, you know, be in a certain state of tapu to even touch pūoro. Ehe.
Yeah, kia ora, kōrero.
So for me, I'm really passionate about making space for wahine. I think, you know, that's what me and my crew, my wahine crew, are known for. And I think in terms of bringing the balance back, tāne set a precedence.
Kia ora.
You know, have those convos with other tāne. How are we going to make space for wahine? Don't ask us. We'll make the space. We're ready. Just give us the space. But it's not just wahine. Takatapui need their own space. Whakawahine, whakatāne. You know, even if tāne had their own pūoro space, like I just think that the getting together and talking amongst ourselves and our groups, and unfortunately because we live in a colonised world, we're all gendered now. So to bring the balance back, I think we need to find strength in who we are. And where you think you sit. Maybe you think you don't sit in either wahine tāne or like it's not a gendered thing at all for you. But at the moment, considering that there is such an imbalance in Tao Māori in general, I think, we live in a patriarchal society, but we haven't been patriarchal people. That's not our history. Yeah, so for me, it's about setting precedences and just not doing boring tokenistic stuff. Like actually talk to your boys.
Be about it.
Be about it. So I probably didn't put that in the most eloquent way. But
it's really, really important that we talk about these things. And one of the things that I've realised in myself and how I approach it is because I consciously strive to make sure that my whakaaro are always towards thinking about how I can tautoko wahine.
Yes.
But I don't think making sure my whakaaro are consciously active in doing that, I don't think it's enough. I've got to actually do it.
Yes.
And I think that's a big thing that I've been pushing within my own practices. Just because I support them the way that I do doesn't mean that I actually put myself on the line to make sure.
No, yeah, and I think that's important. Like how I was saying to you, I had to uncomfortably assert myself where I didn't want to. I think you might need to do that too.
Absolutely.
Assert yourself. And, you know, because it's not essential feminism. White feminists have ruined feminism. I feel like we have mana tangata in Te Ao Māori, which is exactly what feminism is.
Kia ora.
Mana tangata. And it's about that, like supporting our wahine is knowing that there is a huge imbalance, not just wahine, but supporting our non-tāne folk. But I say this to you all the time, bro, as I also think that our tāne need help too. Like toxic masculinity and all that stuff, that seems like we need help.
Yeah, we really do, you know, and I think for me, it's about striving for that balance and about making sure that we actively strive for it, not just through whakaaro and through, you know, this is how I feel, but actually make it happen.
Yeah, so I think mana tangata is the way to go, just thinking of that. And hashtag whakamanagai, that's a thing. That's a ture in our houses. Hashtag whakamanagai. But it's something that I'm actively trying to practice, like getting into a space and not getting shitty at the tāne and tearing them down. Like, that's not hashtag whakamanagai behaviour.
Yeah, I don't.
Like, trying to not see, you know, when tāne are just annoying and take up all the space and mansplain. Like me as a fierce wahine Māori, my first instinct is to go in for a fight. But coming back to mana tangata, whakamana, I feel like those are good practices to help bring back balance rather than fighting each other or trying to be like, we need this help more, we need this. Yeah, I'm here to support tāne. I'm here to support wahine. I'm here to support those that don't identify as either. Hashtag whakamanagai, hashtag Māori avatar. Unite all the nations.
Unite all the nations. Well, e mihi tuana ki a koe. I think it's a really important kōrero for us to have. A lot of the time as practitioners, we think about this stuff and we kind of talk about it with our close peeps. But I think it's really important that we start openly talking about it and openly doing something about it.
Yeah.
So, tēnei mihi tuana. Before we finish up, I just wanted to go back to your practice.
Yes.
And one of the things that I absolutely love is the wānanga that you have with tamariki. And, kia whakawhanaka i ainga, te hunga mai titi, te hunga wā, kengo, ki nei mo māhuatanga. Tēnā kōrero mai. So talk a little bit about the mahi that you do in terms of wānanga, oro, pūrākau, but with our tātai tamariki.
I love them. I was saying to you before, it's the best time to corrupt them is when they're young. And that's what Auntie Kahu does. She corrupts all the tamariki to play rocks and bones and shells. They're just cool. That's who I feel like the humans that I relate to the most are tamariki. What could I say? That's where my heart is. I've spent many years as a storyteller, a little bit less of recent years, you know, working with tamariki, but that's where I was made. I was working with tamariki. So I feel like whenever I have adults, I'm like, oh, yous are a piece of cake.
Yeah.
I can handle like 300 kids. Yeah, so storytelling for tamariki and teaching them about taonga pūoro, they get it, you know, like they get it. But then I've been into, you know, when you get into high schools, which is also another one of my favourite ages, teenagers, just the best. I feel like my humour does really well with teenagers. But they see me, weird witch lady, with like rocks and bones, and they're like, weird, those instruments. But I love that energy because it makes me a trickster. And then, you know, just showing kids that bones and sticks and how they can be used as instruments. Yeah, kids get it. And my approach to wānanga is fun.
Kia ora.
I'm just fun and funny.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing too, you know, because a lot of the times when we're wānanga with adults, you got to be serious a lot of the times.
And they're just always like, it's people talking at each other. I'm a very hands-on person. That's how I learn, by making mistakes and getting rough and getting into it. But yeah, I love the energy of tamariki. And they're always so receptive. Adults are way more insecure, so you have to work through all the insecurities, all the walls that they put up. And tamariki have a lot less of that, and hence the reason why I say they're so much more fun to corrupt, to make them into heathens. And you'll know, I have my Pepe, my youngest, she's a pūoro player, and but you know what, I'm pretty sad for her. She goes to a kura kaupapa and no one else in her kura plays. So she goes to kura. She recently got given a full case of pūoro, her first ever storyteller case. And she went to school the next day to tell all her mates about it. And they were like, what?
What's that?
Oh, how te pūtori no? Kare te moio. But then when she's amongst our crew, I feel like people see Piata and they're like, she is the realisation of all of our dreams.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see that girl at the front and they're waving her kōiwi o he wheua torua. You know, like, you know, this is everything that we've dreamed about, all of us collectively.
Yes.
And the same with my little fella Tāmihana. He's 4 and he plays a pukaya and he plays it properly.
Yes.
And it's the most beautiful thing that we have with this part in the journey that we're at, is that these realizations, that these tamariki mokopuna that are growing up with this as an entrenched part of their development. This for me is an absolutely amazing and beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I tēnei mihi atu ana. Have you anything that you wanted to add towards the end of it now?
No, thank you. What a great show. You're a great interviewer.
Fake it till you make it.
No, tino pai tēnei.
Oh, no reira, I mihi atu ana ki a koe, ke taku hoa, I toha mai ngā tini āhuatanga o tō mahi, ki tēnei wānanga o tātou, o tira o tāua. Ka tika raka, kia whakakapia I ki te karakia. Ka tahi kamutsu. Aunuhia ki te uru tapu nui a tāne kia wātea kia māma te ngā kau te hinengaro te wairua te tinana I te arataka tū. E rongo whakairi ake ki runga kia wātea aira kua wātea hou. A tūturu kia rongo kia whakamaua kia tīna. Haumi e hui e tāi ki e. Mauri ora.
Ko te piko te mahuri ko ia te tipu a te rākaui. Heri tā tangata